In this learning objective, we're going to look at finding one trig function if we know another. And so based on our connection to SOHCAHTOA and the unit circle, if we can put those two things together, we can connect different trig functions together. So in the example, we know that cotangent of an angle is 24/7, and the angle is in quadrant 1. What is the value of sine? So right away, when you see quadrant 1, you want to automatically connect this to the unit circle. But actually, the most important thing for this learning objective is to connect it to SOHCAHTOA. With SOHCAHTOA, we always have to have a right triangle. And we need to know what angle A is. So let's just call the bottom left angle A. So if we have the cotangent of an angle when we're doing SOHCAHTOA, cotangent is related to tangent. Tangent's opposite over adjacent. So cotangent is adjacent over opposite. It's just the opposite of tangent. All right. But at the same time, we know it has to be equal to that ratio of the sides of a right triangle. But at the same time, we know it has to be equal, based on to what they told us, has to be equal to 24/7. All right, so what does that tell me? It tells me that the adjacent side of my right triangle should be 24, and the opposite side of my right triangle should be 7. All right, so knowing the value of a trig function actually helps me label two sides of this kind of right triangle that I made up. And if I have a right triangle, I can always use the Pythagorean theorem to figure out a missing side. So I can say that the missing side is the hypotenuse, so I'll call it h. 8 squared plus 24 squared plus 7 squared. 24 squared I cannot do in my head, so I'm just going to use the calculator to do 24 times 24. That's 576. 49, or 7 squared I can do, is 49. So 8 squared is 576 plus 49, which is 625. And now that I have 8 squared equals a single number, I can take the square root of both sides. And h is going to be 25. And square root of 625 is 25. And so now I have all of this. And if I think about what my original goal was to find sine of the angle. I'm going to know that sine of an angle is SOHCAHTOA is opposite over hypotenuse. If I look at my right triangle, my opposite side is 7. My hypotenuse is 25. So if the cotangent of an angle is 24/7, the sine of that same angle has to be 7/25. All right, so this is the basic idea of this learning objective. Using SOHCAHTOA to create this right triangle seemingly out of nowhere, using the Pythagorean theorem to figure out the missing side that you don't get, because it only gives you the ratio of 2 sides, you need 3 sides, and then using SOHCAHTOA again. All right, so let's see about this one. Tangent of B is 8/5. Again, you can make any right triangle you want and call any angle you want B. And then tangent, based on SOHCAHTOA, tangent is TOA is opposite over adjacent. And at the same time, that needs to be equal to 8/5. So my opposite side is going to be 8. And my adjacent side is going to be 5. All right, I don't know the hypotenuse yet, so I can use the Pythagorean theorem to figure out that 8 squared plus 5 squared, 64 plus 25 is, what is that, 89. And I take the square root of both sides. Let's get h is the square root of 89, which I'm pretty sure does not simplify. It's definitely not divisible by 4, not divisible by 9. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's divisible by any of our perfect squares, so it's just the square root of 89. And now I can finish off my problem. The cosine of that angle B. Cosine is adjacent. The adjacent side is 5. The hypotenuse is the square root of 89. And you don't want to finish there because there's a square root on the bottom of your fraction, so I multiply the top and bottom by that square root. To get my final answer, 5 times the square root of 89, over when I multiply the two squares together, they cancel, and I just get 89. All right, so that would be the final answer for this one. All right, for this problem, we know the cosecant, and we're going to find the cotangent. All right, but nothing's going to change. I'm still going to make my right triangle. All right, cosecant. Cosecant is related to sine. Sine is so opposite over hypotenuse, so cosecant is going to be hypotenuse over opposite. So right away I know my hypotenuse is going to be the square root of 61, and my opposite side is going to be 5. All right, using that I can figure out the missing side. Let's just call it A. All right, so square root of 61 squared, equals 5 squared plus A squared. All right, squaring a square root, they cancel out. Subtract 25 from both sides. 61 minus 25 is 36. Taking square roots, A equals 6. All right, so now I can figure out the cotangent of my angle. Again, cotangent is related to tangent. Tangent's opposite over adjacent, so this is going to be adjacent over opposite. The adjacent side is 6. The opposite side is 5. All right, here's the first one where we didn't have our angle in quadrant 1. And it's in quadrant 1, everything is positive. I was in quadrant 2. Let's see, sine is positive, but cosine is negative. So once I start dividing them, like I do in cotangent and tangent, they're also going to be negative. So to get the final answer right, I have to add an extra negative sign at the front of this. And so the very final thing, we haven't had to do it in any other examples, but if you look at your final answer, just make sure, if you look at your final answer, based on the quadrant, make sure it's positive or negative, correct? All right, because the sides of a triangle are always positive, that part gets missed when you're doing all this SOHCAHTOA stuff. But we do know the quadrants tell us if something's positive or negative, so make sure you double check that for your final answer. All right, and here's one for you to try your own. It's in quadrant 1, so it's going to be positive. All right, but you know cosine, find cotangent. And the final answer you get after you do all the work is that cotangent is 4 over 9. Again, so cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, so I was able to label these two sides of my right triangle. Pythagorean theorem figured out the missing side was 9, and then cotangent is adjacent over hypotenuse, so 4 divided by 9. All right, so for this learning objective, you're going to do some problems on delta math. You need to complete 6 total problems to get credit for this bonus objective.